International trade, it can feel super complicated, right? But it affects pretty much everything we buy and do. So today, we're going to tackle a big one, a real flashpoint that a lot of people have been asking about, the trade dispute between the US and India under the Trump administration. We're going to break down exactly what went down and why it's so important.
All right, so where do we even begin with all this? Well, our guide for this whole explainer comes straight from a real search someone typed in. It's a little messy, sure, but it's perfect. It asks the exact questions we need to answer. What happened, why, when, and maybe most importantly, what were the disadvantages for India? We're going to use this as our roadmap to get some crystal clear answers.
Okay, let's jump right in. First things first, we got to get the what and the when straight. Before we can get into the why of it all, we need to lay out a clear timeline of what actually happened.
And just so we're all on the same page, let's lock in this key term, a tariff. So what is it? Think of it this way. It's basically an entrance fee for foreign products. When something gets imported, this tax gets slapped on, making it more expensive for people in the new country. It's a classic move, one of the oldest tools in the economic toolbox, really.
So how did this whole thing actually play out? Well, it happened in a few key steps. First, the US took a hard look at India's special status under this program, the GSP, which for a long time had basically given a bunch of Indian goods a duty-free pass into the US market. Then, step 2, that special access was officially pulled. Step 3, the US brought in new tariffs on steel and aluminum that hit a number of countries, and that included India. And finally, step 4, in a classic tit-for-tat move, India hit back with its own tariffs on American products.
Okay, so that's what happened, but now for the million-dollar question, why? Why did all of this go down in the first place? This is where it gets a little more complex.
Well, to really get the why, you have to look at it from both sides, because there are two very different stories here. From the US perspective, the stated goal was to rebalance the scales. The administration's view was that there was a major trade imbalance and that American companies just weren't getting a fair shot in India's markets. So the tariffs were seen as leverage to negotiate a better deal. Now India, well, they had a totally different take. They argued that the US was going it alone, basically ignoring global trade rules. India's position was that its market policies made sense for a developing economy, and that these tariffs were just unfair.
And that leads us right to the last part of that original question we started with. What is disadvantage of India? Because let's be real, these kinds of moves always have real-world consequences, and they're not just numbers on a page. So for India, this wasn't just one thing, it was like a domino effect. Instantly, Indian exports to the US got more expensive. And what happens then? They become less competitive. A business in the US might choose a similar product from another country that's now cheaper. For big industries like steel and aluminum, that could mean selling less stuff, which can lead to cutting back production and, you guessed it, potential job losses. But maybe the biggest damage of all was the uncertainty it created. It just threw a cloud over the whole US-India trade relationship, which makes it incredibly tough for businesses to plan for the future.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It really boils down to this. Tariffs are a tool. They're all about creating economic pressure to try and force another country to change its policies. But, and this is a huge but, it's a tool that comes with a hefty price tag for everyone involved. It hurts exporters on one side and consumers on the other. It's a powerful move, but it's definitely not a painless one.
When you step back from this one case, it really shines a light on a huge fundamental question that pretty much every country is wrestling with right now. In a world that is so deeply connected, how do you protect your own economy, your own jobs, while still being part of this massive global system? There's no easy answer, is there? But figuring that out, well, that's one of the defining challenges of our time.